that there might be what? Meat in the storehouse. Test me and you will see. And if the church does not respect that because of sending missionaries and say, go and work and support yourself, you will be chargeable before the Lord. That's why I said this message is primarily for the ministers, but any one of us can be called into this ministry. Amen. Yeah, so Paul was not supporting himself completely. No. Referring later to his experience in that city, he wrote to the Philippian believers in acknowledgement of the gifts he had received from them while there, saying, even in Thessalonica, ye sent once and again unto my necessity. Philippians 4:16. Notwithstanding the fact that he received this help, he was careful to set before the Thessalonians an example of what? Diligence. Did we read that diligence is a principle of success? And so Paul did show that example, so that none could rightfully accuse him of covetousness, and also that those who held fanatical views regarding manual labor might be given a practical rebuke. Amen? So Paul wanted to avoid covetousness. You see, we read in the book of Proverbs that a slothful person desireth, and he will die because of coveting. You see, if you are a minister and you do not have means, and you are working, you are going to labor in the field and you are sharing the gospel, but you do not have, and the church is unable to support you, you know you will keep coveting. You understand that? Each time you see people with means, you will say, I wish that the Lord will bring such means. Do you think you can still remember? You understand? Because you are in want. But Paul didn't want to be in that situation, to avoid covetousness for the minister, and again, to correct fanatical views regarding labor. He gave a practical rebuke. And what's the best way of teaching the church except by practicing it yourself? If the minister stands on the pulpit and teach people about diligence, and he himself is not diligent, if he teaches people about manual work, and he himself doesn't work manually, will the church really embrace his teachings? The gospel is better practiced than taught. Amen? And I really believe that's what Jesus did. He did much than he taught. When Paul first visited Corinth, he found himself among people who were suspicious of the motives of strangers. The Greeks on the seacoast were keen traders. So long had they trained themselves in sharp business practice that they had come to believe that gain was godliness, and that to make money, whether by fair means or foul, was commendable. Now you understand this was the dominant thought at Corinth. These Greeks, being traders, seasoned traders, they came to believe that gain is godliness. Wewe unaenda kufanya kazi kwa watu wenye wanaamini kupata mapato, hiyo ndio kukua Mkristo. Umeelewa? Na wewe unakuja na wewe unataka kuhubiri bila kufanya kazi, utawashawishi hawa watu? Watasema, do you want me to become like you? So he says Paul was acquainted with their characteristics, and he will give them no occasion for saying that he preached the gospel in order to enrich himself. Amen? And ministers should also know this. We are not going to preach to earn means for enriching ourselves. We just want to preach the gospel and win the people to Jesus. Amen? And if there are people who will think we are preaching because we want means, I ask you, even in Kenya, is the thought dominant that when someone becomes a pastor, it's because he wants money? If you open your own church, in fact, even in our place, when we separated from the mainstream church, people will say, awa wameanza kanisa yao. I remember even one brother wrote to us and he said, the tithes you are eating, you will vomit all of them, pretending that you are ministers. Now, I'm not entitled. I was not entitled to any tithe. That was false accusation from him. But do you understand the dominant idea? So if you are going to work amid these people who think when you begin a church, it's because you want what? Money. And that was a situation where Paul was. And if we are coming into such situation as ministers, and especially with people suspecting our movement, what should be the correct order of how things should be done? Shouldn't we be so balanced, avoiding extreme views on each direction? Because I said earlier, there are two extreme views. One is to love the world and to advance the works of the world and gain as much money at the expense of the gospel. You understand? And the other view will be just preach and preach and preach. Worry not about tomorrow. You understand that? And especially if you are working among us people who are suspecting us, thinking like we separated because we didn't receive a fair share of tithes in the church. No, that was not the reason. We separated for truth's sake, amen? And I think like Paul, we can act this noble task as he did. So we continue reading here. He might justly have claimed support from his Corinthian hearers, but this right he was willing to forego, lest his usefulness and success as a minister should be injured by the unjust suspicion that he was preaching the gospel for gain. He will seek to remove all occasion for misrepresentation, that the force of his message might not be lost. Amen? So I understand, if you go and preach and you are working among his people who really believe in gain, you also work, and they will say, he is a pastor, but he's a different pastor. Because many pastors are just known for walking around and just preaching, right? Do they do anything else apart from that? They are supposed to be given fare and vehicles and be moved from place to place. That's the order of things. But if we became a different order of preachers and missionaries like Paul, then we will beat these prejudices that people have against us. Amen? Yeah. So, sorry. Soon after his arrival at Corinth, Paul found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy, with his wife Priscilla. These were of the same craft with himself. You remember the story of Aquila and his wife Priscilla? Did I say it right? Who was the wife of the other? Priscilla was the wife of Aquila. All right. They were banished by the decree of Claudius, which commanded all Jews to leave Rome. Aquila and Priscilla had come to Corinth, where they established a business as manufacturers of what? Tents. Paul made inquiry concerning them, and learning that they feared God and were seeking to avoid the contaminating influences with which they were surrounded, he abode with them and wrote. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks. Amen? Yeah. In his second letter to the believers in Corinth, written after he had raised up a strong church there, Paul reviewed his manner of life among them. Have I committed an offense? He asked. In abasing myself that he might be exalted, because I have preached to you the gospel of God freely. You see, he never received at Corinth. He just preached and he supported himself. And now he says, did I make a mistake? Did I offend you by doing that? By abasing myself to make you? He says, to make you what? Oh, you are not having the akili yangu bado inaniambia mnasoma kutoka huko. Kumbe ni mimi peke yangu nasoma. Okay, so he says, abasing myself that he might be exalted. So he abased himself that they might. He said, I robbed other churches, taking wages of them to do you service. And when I was present with you and wanted, I was chargeable to no man. For that which was lacking to me, the brethren which came from Macedonia supplied. And in all things I have kept myself from being burdensome unto you. And so will I keep myself, as the truth of Christ is in me. No man shall stop me of this boasting in the regions of Achaia. Amen? So Paul will have something to boast about. He said that when I came to you, I was not burdensome. Amen? And I hope that as ministers, we can come also to this situation where we can say to the churches, I thank God when I came to you, I was not what? Burdensome. I was not chargeable to you. He says he robbed other churches. He received means from other churches to support that other church. And that's the best thing we can have. Paul tells why he had followed this course in Corinth. It was that he might give no cause for reproach to them which desire occasion. So people will be waiting for some situation to find an occasion against you. But Paul never wanted to give that chance. Just going forward, now I'm at page 351, paragraph 2. During the long period of his ministry in Ephesus, where for 3 years he carried forward an aggressive evangelistic effort throughout the region, Paul again worked at his trade. Paul will be in places for a very long time, right? Like, for example, in Ephesus, how long was he there?